I believe the American people should decide abortion policy. I believe that's what our Constitution designs. Unfortunately, my Democrat colleagues on this committee disagree. They do not believe in democracy when it comes to the issue of abortion. They want unelected judges to set one standard for the entire country. And if the voters disagree, the voters have no choice. And look, the reason the Democrats want this issue to be out of the hands of the voters is quite obvious. Because the modern Democrat Party is wildly out of step with the American people on the question of abortion. The current position of virtually every Democrat senator in this body is that abortion should be absolutely unlimited, available up until the moment of birth, and even, shockingly, in some instances, after birth. That partial birth abortion should be fully legal. That there should be no parental notification and no parental consent, no matter how young the girl is who may be seeking an abortion. And that all of it should be funded by taxpayer money. Now, that is an extreme and radical view. How extreme and radical? Well, according to a Harvard-Harris poll from last year, 10% of Americans, only 10%, support abortion on demand up until the point of birth. That's the position. If you want to be a Democrat in the Senate, that's the position you have to embrace, because that's where the money is. That's where the activists are. That's where the angry voices are that fuel a Democrat campaign. But 90% of Americans look at that position and say, we disagree. And so you understand now why my Democrat colleagues don't want this decision decided by the voters. Because if 90% of the voters disagree with the extreme policy decision they've embraced, their position will not prevail at the ballot box. And by the way, it's not just the voters in the United States who disagree with Senate Democrats on this. It is virtually every voter on planet Earth. The United States is such an extreme outlier. Out of the entire country, there are only 7 countries on Earth out of the entire planet that allow abortion after 20 weeks. And yet every one of my Democrat colleagues wants to do so. Europe, virtually all of Europe, including the left-wing socialists, the Greens there, they think the Democrats in this body are loons on this issue. Sweden has an 18-week limit on seeking an abortion. None of my Democrat colleagues would vote for Sweden's law. France has a 14-week limit. France! None of my colleagues would vote for France's law. Germany and Luxembourg have 12-week limits. And the position of Democrats is 40 weeks, up until the very moment of birth, no limits at all. That's a horrifying position. I suppose my Democrat colleagues can comfort themselves with the company they're in. Communist China, Iran, and North Korea, and the National Democrat Party. They all have the same view. Those tyrannies, at least, are explicit, which is life has no value. And so they don't embrace any limits. And by the way, look, there's so much rhetoric on this issue that a skeptical listener would be justified doubting what any of us are saying. But if you don't believe what I'm saying, look to the votes. In the wake of the Supreme Court overturning Roe and sending this decision back to the voters so the voters could decide, what did my colleagues in the Senate do? Promptly voted on a bill that would strike down just about every reasonable restriction in the country that the voters have decided to legalize partial birth abortion, to provide no protection for unborn children. Those are extreme positions. And Dr. Scope, I'd like to ask you, What are the consequences of unlimited abortion on demand? What does a 40-week or a 36-week unborn child who is enduring a partial birth abortion, what does that child experience if that procedure is allowed to happen?
A partial birth abortion delivers the baby intact. So the very first thing that would happen is that the woman's cervix must be aggressively dilated to a large dilation. That is very likely to damage her cervix, and several high-quality systematic reviews have documented increased risk of preterm birth in a subsequent pregnancy after a procedure like that. So not only is it hurting her this time, it will lead to further complications such as cervical incompetence. The baby generally is not killed first. As I reported, 70% of late-term abortion providers say they do not routinely do this. These babies are highly likely to continue to live throughout the process of labor. They're delivered as a breech, and their head is crushed. So that would be the point when they would die, is when their head is crushed. Other late-term abortion, they're blind procedures in many cases. So the instruments could damage the uterus. They could puncture the uterus. There are a number of horrible consequences documented where adjacent bowel has been disrupted, urinary tract injuries, hemorrhage. There is really no reason that an abortion needs to be done that late, ever.
Thank you.